Well, good afternoon. It is 1:45 and welcome to our session on how performance funding can drive post-secondary success. We're thrilled that you're here today in that coveted time slot of right after lunch when we're all settling into a little nap. So I hope not. I think we have a really great set of panelists. I'm excited to engage them in great dialogue, making a commitment to you now to make sure to reserve time for Q&A, so get your questions ready. First, to my left is Representative Bob Benning from the state of Indiana. He has served in the Indiana House of Representatives since 1992 and represents House District 91, which includes a portion of Marion County. He was born and raised in Indianapolis and has been a proud Hoosier his entire life. We were just talking about that because I'm a Syracuse alum and they beat us in '87. In 1976, he received a BS from Indiana University. Throughout his tenure as representative, he has advocated for education reform in Indiana, as many of you already know. As chair of House Education Committee, he led a multi-year effort to successfully pass the most comprehensive education reform package in the United States. Benning believes all parents deserve the right to choose the school that best meets their child's needs. In 2011, he authored legislation creating the School Choice Scholarship Program, providing families who do not have the financial means to pay the cost of tuition at a private school with a scholarship. Indiana currently has the largest school voucher program in the United States. Rep. Benning currently works at Marion University as the Assistant Vice President and Director of the Center for Vibrant Schools. So please join me in welcoming Representative Benning. A round of applause. Dr. Paul Burns, my colleague from Leadership Florida and the Florida Department of Education, joined the Department of Ed in 2018 as the Deputy Chancellor for Education Quality, bringing with him nearly 20 years of education experience. In January of 23, he became the Chancellor of Public Schools. In August of 24, he was elevated to the role of Senior Chancellor, and his responsibilities expanded to include overseeing the offices of Early Learning, Public Schools, School Choice, Safe Schools, and School Accountability. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Burns. And finally, and last but not least, Madison Yandel in her first ExcelinEd conference ever. Welcome, Madison, from the Texas Governor's Office. Madison is Education Policy Advisor to Governor Greg Abbott, where she leads the office's education and workforce alignment efforts. Since beginning her career in 2013, she has worked on various statewide campaigns at the University of Texas System and at the Texas Department of Agriculture, and in both the Texas House and Senate. She's also worked as a policy advisor for education at Texas 2036, a nonpartisan think tank in Austin. Madison grew up on a cattle ranch in Holiday, Texas, before attending the University of Texas, where she earned a BS in government with a minor in philosophy. Please join me in welcoming Madison. It's loud. Well, excellent. So I'm excited about this session. My name is Larry Miller. I'm the Chief Academic Officer at Greenville Technical College and also a scholar who's written on performance funding in a lot of different venues, so that's why I'm here moderating the panel today. I'm a firm believer that we need to use our most powerful lever, which is our funding, to incentivize big performance increases across our system if we hope to achieve our 60 by 30 ascend goals and meet our workforce demands, which continue to grow. So with that, I am going to jump right into Q&A with our panelists, and we are going to start with Representative Benning. So my first question is, how is Indiana using scholarships to incentivize students to go into high-value careers, for example, through Workforce Ready grants?
Thank you, Larry. Thank you to ExcelinEd for this opportunity. In 2018, Indiana launched Workforce. It's called Next Level Jobs, which is really two different programs. One is the Adult Student Grant Program and Workforce Ready grants, with really the goal of hitting the 60% by 2030. The focus of that was to really provide additional support for students who were not necessarily always traditional students to go into occupations that have been deemed highly in demand by our Department of Workforce Development. And those categories in the first iteration were advanced manufacturing, building and constructions, health sciences, IT and business services, and transportation and logistics. Indiana is actually in the Midwest. We have a significant, I think we rank in the top 10 in the country in terms of state student aid. And we decided to launch this program in 2018 and provide additional support for certification programs as well as for degree focus areas in those specific fields. We allow, and I have a lot of statistics, so bear with me a little bit.
Go for it.
Workforce Ready Grant eligibility is not based on financial aid, so it is not based on financial needs. So a FAFSA is encouraged but not mandatory. If FAFSA is completed and the Pell Grant would be used, Workforce Ready Grants would be last. We provide a maximum of $5,500 for up to 2 years, and the program is limited to eligible training providers and programs that align with those next-level jobs. So we have two different categories under Workforce Ready Grants. We have credit-bearing programs, which would be those that are really provided by postsecondary institutions like a community college. To be eligible for that, they have to have a certificate, program, name, high-value sector. It has to share the total credit hours, total cost, prior year enrollment, maximum enrollment, and the Department of Workforce Development rating for the job, and then Title IX eligibility. If you're non-credit bearing program and certificate program name, you have to have high-value sector, basically all the same prior enrollment and max enrollment and flame rating industry certification. What we have found that this small investment has yielded unbelievable results. To give you a few of the details, we invest today about a total of about $8 million a budget for that, although we did have an additional money put in the 2023 with the CARES Act. We had additional money and allowed individuals to receive a grant that had already received an associate or bachelor's degree but had not earned a graduate or professional degree. We also exhausted, if they had exhausted all of their 4-year funds from our state student assistance, we raised the cap for the 23 year from $5,500 to $10,000. And then we included additional occupations outside of the first 5 that I had shared with you. Some of the results we found, for instance, in the of the recipients, 2018 recipients in the credit-bearing Workforce Ready Grants received 77 of the recipients who received degrees, 77% were found to be employed with a 19% wage increase after year 1, and with wages that increased 65% after 4 years. So a huge increase for that. For credit-bearing Work-Ready Grant recipients who received an initial grant from 18 to 20 and obtained a degree by 2021, the average 1-year wage growth from 1 year prior to the degree was 47%. So huge gains in terms of numbers. The largest category is health, and these recipients also illustrated the greatest gains in wages after degree completion for Workforce Ready Grants, and they actually experienced wage growth of 81% in 2 years. So the program has yielded significant results, and in terms of funding for the state, it's obviously something when you change somebody's life trajectory in such a way, they are definitely paying more taxes and returning that investment back to the state. So it has been a program that has done a significant job of really moving towards that 60%, but also benefiting Hoosiers in a big way.
Big way. It sounds like it easily pays for itself and then some.
Correct.
Well, thank you, Rep. Menning. Dr. Burns, Paul, Florida has a large focus on keeping students in high school through its incentive. How is Florida using scholarships to incentivize students to go into higher value careers, for example, through your Bright Futures Scholarship?
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. Thanks to ExcelinEd also for allowing me to be here, and really appreciate that question, because when we think about Florida, when we think about what our needs are in Florida, making sure that we have great workers who are able to fill the demand and the needs, our workforce needs across the state. Part of that is really by putting our money where our mouth is and trying to create programs that help incentivize and keep really our students based in Florida. We have a great program that's really been in place for many years called our Bright Futures program, which you just mentioned. And that program was really started in 1997 by the Florida Lottery. And so as a part of that program, part of the incentives and the scholarship that students are able to receive, it's really our kind of merit premier-based program, scholarship program that we have in the state that incentivizes our students to stay there. I will tell you, from having spent a long time in a district, the Bright Futures program is a great program, but there's also an opportunity for us in Florida to continue to really push and to make sure that our students, to make sure that our families, our parents, and to make sure that our teachers and our school counselors kind of understand the full breadth of our Bright Futures scholarship program. I think sometimes there is a little bit of a misnomer out there in the state when we look at our Bright Futures scholarship program, and there are folks who think that the scholarship program is really just for those kind of high-performing, high-need students. And so what we know in Florida, right, what works is choice and options, right, from the K-12 side. And so when you look at our scholarship and our Bright Futures program, we use, and the legislature has really put that same kind of methodology and thinking in place, right? So there really are, when I think of the Bright Futures program, it's kind of a bifurcated kind of pathway. We have those kind of two path programs that we have in Bright Futures, our Florida academic program, the academic scholar program, our medallion scholar program, for those students who really want to enter that kind of baccalaureate, that bachelor's degree program at a college or university. But I think a lot of folks don't spend enough time in our Bright Futures program really talking about that other pathway that we have, which is our Gold Seal pathway, right? And our Gold Seal pathway is still available. It's still a Bright Futures program that covers tuition and fees at institutions. And those Gold Seal programs really allow students, right, if they're not on that track, right, through the traditional college or university, and they want to go to a program and earn a credential or a credential of value, the Bright Futures program still allows students to be able to do that. In fact, our Commissioner of Education and our Secretary of the Lottery this past school year were on a road tour, which I got to be a part of, and we were visiting different high schools across the state. And I know the Commissioner is ambitious and has decided to double that number of visits that we do for next school year, to continue to make sure that we provide this type of information to our students, that we make sure our school counselors really know the information about Bright Futures, and really that we have that dual pathway, that kind of Gold Seal program for those entering workforce, and then that other program for the kids that are headed into college. Part of the beauty of the Bright Futures program is that for the academic side of it, it pays 100% of the tuition and fees for students if they meet the qualifications and earn that top tier for the academic program as part of the Bright Futures. The medallion, that second level, pays 75% of the tuition and fees as well. And again, that's just a great incentive for Florida families and for students to be able to retain and use those monies. And there's over 239 institutions between our colleges, our universities, and then also our technical colleges and our other institutions that lead to those workforce-ready credentials. They're able to use those dollars with the Gold Seal pathway. It's the same as the academic. It's still 100% of the program fees for that particular program are able to be used by the student. They can use their Bright Future dollars. So I think that it's really a great opportunity for how we continue to focus and keep our students really in Florida. So again, our students can use it at our Florida colleges, universities, and even private colleges and universities that we have in Florida as well. And so we're really grateful to the legislature that they've continued to fund this program year after year. year. We also have, recently that was passed in statute, a program called our Open Door program. And the Open Door program was passed in the 23 legislative session in Florida, which allows those adults, right, who are currently working, but if they want to go back to an institution, they want to earn and receive stackable credentials, it works like the Bright Futures. They don't have to be in school anymore. So that program is designed for those working adults to be able to go back and return, right, to one of our Florida college institutions or to one of our technical college to earn additional workforce credentials of value. And so it allows them to use a similar program to be able to access those kind of workforce programs.
That's excellent. And hopefully we'll address some of those. What's the latest number I hear? 44 million adults with some education and no credential in America. So hopefully that open door policy can address some of those gaps. Ms. Yondell, again, welcome. Texas, all eyes are on Texas with House Bill 8. I'm really excited, especially the secondary folks. So you're engaged in post-secondary this time with more of an institutional focus. House Bill 8 passed by the legislature in 23 ties a majority of state allocations for community colleges to performance-based measures. What is House Bill 8 and what are the goals of the legislation? And can you tell us why the state decided to make this change?
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Miller, and appreciate ExcelinEd having me here for a captive audience on school finance. I don't get that very often. So I'll start with your last question, kind of around the goals and what brought us to HB 8. So starting back almost 10 years ago in 2015, the state created what was known as 60 by 30, and it was essentially our state goals for kind of our workforce outcomes. And the goal was to have at least 60% of Texans age 25 to 34 to have a certificate or some sort of degree. Since then, we've actually expanded it to include all working age Texans and also recognize credentials of value. The state's done a lot of work to creating a credential library and really recognizing those short-term certificates. And then we also now recognize attainment at any point of the system with an emphasis on high school attainment. And so, leading up to the 2021 session, we were almost at 50%, but there was a recognition that a lot of what was helping us work towards 60% was our out-of-state migration into Texas. A lot of companies have to recruit outside of the state, and not only are we, we want to ensure that Texans are getting those jobs, but we also know that in-state migration is not going to continue on the rate increase, and that we're going to really have to ensure that Texans can take those jobs. And so the session prior, in 2019, we did a massive school finance reform for K-12, and a big piece of that was aligning funding to performance. We created college and career and military outcomes bonuses, incentivized more kind of data-driven behavior, and it was, we kind of realized it's like, okay, it's time to do this in higher ed, and community colleges are one of our best tools for kind of bringing together kind of all of our different systems. We already had schools set up to do that, but our contact hour-based funding system wasn't reflective of what our needs were. So similar to what we did with K-12, conducted a commission and brought kind of all the best and brightest together to think through what a performance, a system driven towards outcomes would look like. And the commission decided that we needed to reward community colleges for positive outcomes that were tied to our state goals, that we needed to increase affordability, address particularly for low-income students, their access, and then also addressed capacity issues, particularly for our rural institutions. That it's not that they don't want to provide those programs, but they're expensive to set up, particularly when you're talking just the economies of scale, that you're putting in massive resources for a lot fewer students. So that they created kind of a framework and then went to the legislature and ultimately became HB 8, where we created our our outcomes based system, which was the kind of the base level of all funding. So about 90% is now based on this performance funding formula, which recognizes colleges are rewarded for attainment of credentials based that are aligned to state workforce needs, and also put students on a path to a high wage career. And then they also, on top of that, the community colleges can receive for our kind of highest demand career. So they, both the attainment of kind of our base level, but then if you're getting student, particularly talking about like your welding and robotics and some of our healthcare fields where there's the most need, and at the same time, students can also be put on pathways for high wage careers. And then also kind of recognizing the need to boost the transfers, the kind of drop off in students who continue on to our four-year institutions and who had associate's degrees that weren't really aligned to a high wage career, but if they continued on, they would be, and then also focusing on dual credit completion. So while we have, most of our university or community colleges were financially kind of surviving on dual credit coursework, but unfortunately a lot of times it was students taking a couple credits here and there and not necessarily in any sort of sequence that's putting them on a pathway. So it recognizes the value of a sequence of dual credit courses, and also too reflects that their role in the K-12 system and the necessity of the alignment there as well. And then there's, this amounted in total to just under $700 million in investment on top of the $2 billion the state already provided in funding. And part of that also included we set up a dual credit like state aid program where the state, certain institution or community colleges opt in, and the state covers the cost of dual credit courses for those students. A big issue was, community colleges were different course amounts, and some schools covered it, some schools didn't, and so to ensure that all students have access to that, and then also to almost kind of set them up a pipeline into their outcomes-based funding system, and then also several grants around capacity building, particularly to help institutions create like short-term credential programs. So we have, and then also just kind of general kind of grant funding to help them build facilities, and then kind of work together and provide shared services between rural institutions in particular.
Let me ask one quick follow-up. That's all great. And I'm glad you're incentivizing the transfer success, because I saw a report in the past year, I may misquote it, but I think it's 6-year grad rate. The best state in the country is New Jersey. Community college to university transfer 6-year grad rate was 17% of students succeeded. Way too low. So I'm glad to see those financial incentives there, and no one's doing great with that yet, and I hope Texas leads the way. But I do have a follow-up, and one of the concerns all of us have in public policy when it comes to performance funding is, what about those schools that serve high concentrations of students who are at risk? Is this fair to them, or are they going to be punished by performance funding? What is Texas doing to support high-need students in this model?
Yeah, so the formula also recognizes there's additional weights for students who are economically disadvantaged, students who are academically disadvantaged. So based on our state readiness exam, but they're not there yet, and then also our adult learners. So the formula recognizes that those students typically require more resources. They might require more time, and so when those students attain credentials or transfer, or when they complete dual credit sequences, the system rewards them even more for the community colleges for that. And a part of that too is, especially on the dual credit side, and the transferability really comes into play there, is that we've dramatically increased the number of students that are earning associate's degree in college or in high school, and particularly, we have more and more early college high schools, but it hasn't always translated them to completing a four-year degree. Our drop-off is pretty significant. About 75% of students are graduating K-12 schools, college or career ready, but we're only at about 36% of students completing some sort of post-secondary credential within 6 years. So really kind of tackling that drop-off was kind of a piece of this formula as well.
Well, thank you. Okay, Representative Benning, coming back to you, let's switch back to the high school incentives we talked about earlier. Can you tell us about Indiana's efforts to redesign the high school diploma and how that might incentivize better outcomes for students?
Sure. Indiana is unique in the fact that we only have one major community college, which makes things a lot easier. When it comes down to dual credit, Indiana actually has the largest number of kids who graduate high school with dual credit, with college credit, walking across the stage. However, we have seen, and actually there's a breakout right now talking about this, that a significant number of kids are chronically absent in high school. And I'm sure this is not different in any of the states across the country. We have 32% of high school seniors today are chronically absent from school, which means 1 in 3 basically are missing 18 days or more of school. And that starts at freshman year, starts at 19% and just tracks on up to 32%. You might ask why, and I think there's probably 2 principal reasons. Number one, high school is not relevant to a lot of kids. They think, why am I being taught this? The way we've done it in the past hasn't always been relevant to today's economy. And number 2, I would suggest some of them are just not prepared for the rigors of high school. So what we did, and what we're in the process of doing, 2 years ago we told the department and state board you had to come up with a new diploma design. And we are really moving rapidly, embracing earn and learn models. We believe that taking an opportunity to give a kid to have experiential learning as opposed to sitting in a classroom and learning is something that will get them more engaged and they will remember it for a lifetime. And we've heard that even in some of the breakouts and some of the comments today at ExcelinEd. So we have we repealed all of our current diploma tracks, and we have 3 different types of diploma that will be made available to the General Assembly for us to approve in end of this year. And the 3 tracks are enrollment with seals that so you have a base diploma and then you have seals that track along with that. So you'd have like an academic enrollment seal, and then you'd have an honor seal that goes along with that. We have employment, so you would have that with a couple of seals that follow that, and enlistment. And we've gone specifically tracking at those 3 tracks and having seals that track with that. The calendar is built in such a way that there are at least 2 days a week that would be available for an earn and learn experience as they move forward. We get their foundational classes in the freshman, sophomore year, and then provide a variety of options for students to move forward in their junior and senior year. There's critics, obviously, coming on, like right now, fine arts are like, you have to mandate fine arts, or you have foreign languages, you have to mandate foreign languages. Depending on your desired focus as a student, those courses are available, and they will continue to be available, but we're no longer requiring them, with the goal of trying to incentivize students to really get more excited and more engaged with their direction as to how they're going to move. We have been very active in Indiana in exploring modern youth apprenticeships, which is something that will help drive this. So we're talking about truly an opportunity. I actually have an apprentice at work, and one of the struggles we have today, which I'm sure is true all over the country, is the young man comes in, he's a senior in high school now, comes in about 3:15 in the afternoon and works for 2 hours. And we recognize for this model to work, for you to have robust apprenticeships or earn and learn opportunities, there has to be a return on investment for employers. And when he comes in at 3:15 and has to leave at 5:15, I have to change schedules. A lot of my staff comes in at 7:30, 8 o'clock. Generally would leave at 4, so I have to have staff change hours to be able to supervise that person. And then by the time he gets there, he's just about ready to leave. So we have designed these diplomas, and it could be done in such a way, it doesn't have to be a week, so you wouldn't have to necessarily blow up the high school schedule. It could be that they would have 2 weeks every 4 weeks that they would have time to spend a concentrated time in an employer. And then we are also embedding with those, they have to have certification and credentials of value embedded in these programs, and then as well as dual credits. So the students are coming out with a credential of value or certification, and also with a dual credit opportunity, so they'll have some college credits available too.
Well, thank you. And for those who want to read more, I read, getting ready for this panel, Shiftwork is a journalism site that did a nice story on what you're doing and the inspiration you drew from Switzerland, and you're the closest to Switzerland's model in the U.S., and so really good detailed story there. Shifting to another question for both Dr. Burns and Representative Benning, could you guys talk a little bit more about how Florida and Indiana are creating incentives for high schools to support student transitions to college, career, and military? Dr. Burns?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate that. Part of what I love about that question is when we think about like performance funding and what we're doing in Florida, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing from the college side, but we really do think that when we look at performance forming, it really starts with our K-12 system, right? Mm-hmm. We have to be able to use performance forming funding to make sure that we incentivize great outcomes for kids in that K-12 space so they can easily transition into those post-secondary outcomes. You heard Secretary Oliva talk a little bit about what Arkansas is doing, and we have some of those programs that we have in Florida as well, and that's really incentivizing great teaching and learning, like first and foremost at the K-12 level. We think that's absolutely critical to set our students up for that post-secondary success. So making sure that we identify great teachers in Florida, those teachers who are who are in a school that is chronically underperforming, like Arkansas, we call it our high impact teacher corps. We identify specifically by data using our accountability data. We identify those schools that are underperforming. But when we look at those schools, we then find those teachers that year after year, that even though those schools might be underperforming, we're able to identify those teachers who continue to get great gains for their students year after year in those classes, and then we incentivize those teachers. We bring those teachers, a cohort of those teachers together, and we often ask them, one of the first things we do is ask, what's different about your classroom, right? Why is your classroom, even though this school is underperforming, why is it doing so well? One of the first things they tell us is, well, we just love our kids. And we say, so you mean to tell me your colleague across the hall doesn't love their kids? And they backpedal and say, no, right? And so what we have found is we have to take and replicate what those teachers are doing, which is focusing on great standards, which is having great high-quality materials, which is having and using progress monitoring to adjust instruction. We have to take that and then incentivize from the K-12 side first before we then move into post-secondary. So that's really some of the things that we do there as well. We have school recognitions monies where the legislature appropriates monies for those schools that continue to have high academic outcomes for students. They reward those schools. Then those schools are also rewarded for schools that increase a letter grade from one year to the next. That's part of the incentivized funding as well. And so once we kind of start that and lay that foundation from the K-12 side, then we look at and move into the post-secondary side. And when you look at kind of our college performance funding, there are really kind of four main factors, right, that represent part of that formula, right? It's a big math formula, but I'll just kind of quickly go over kind of those four main factors. The first is retention rates, right, when they're in our college programs. And I do want to mention, I hear folks using the term, right, community college. We in Florida, right, specifically use the word Florida colleges because we do have some of our Florida colleges that still offer the 2-year program, which may be more like the community college model, but then we also have in our Florida colleges those institutions that offer 4-year degrees and 4-year programs as well. And so again, when you look at the college funding performance model, right, retention is certainly the first component in there, right? Looking at and tracking in those programs, right, what the retention rates are for the different candidates and the completers that are in that program. And then after that, not only tracking the retention, but then the completion rates. And looking at the completers and tracking those completers. And so obviously colleges, get more money once they, attract those completers and have a higher completion rate. The third component, a part of that formula, is job placement. So it doesn't obviously satisfy just for a candidate to complete that program, but we then want to make sure that once a candidate completes a program, that they're able to then go on and find job placement. And the final part of that funding, kind of performance funding model, are the wages. And so what we're looking at is tracking are what are the wages, right, and how are the wages of those candidates based on that job placement rate. So those are the four main factors then that go into our college performance funding models. There's definitely some nuances in the formula. One of the ways when you talked about how do you not inadvertently hurt a program based on the students they're serving. In the formula, part of what we have is that if a college overperforms, right, based on its size, and they're able to actually receive additional funding for that as well. And then we also have our colleges and our tech colleges who receive, as part of the funding, $1,000 for each of the students that complete an industry or earn an industry certification as part of the program as well. The kind of final third piece that I'll talk about with performance funding is also, which was a little bit controversial when it passed, right? We worked with our colleges and tech colleges in Florida, but was the money back guarantee program, right? That was passed in the Florida legislature. And we know we had some colleges and universities think, wait, I'm going to have a money back guarantee like we see on TV, right, for my programs. And so that was passed in the legislature and then was revised, and we worked a little bit last session. And essentially what it is that each school district, right, that has the tech college, and then also the Florida college system, each of those institutions, they actually pick, what they do is they pick 3 of their programs, right, well then they offer the money back guarantee for 3 of those workforce programs. So they each pick 3, right, it's not their entire, right, portfolio of programs that they offer, but they each pick 3. There are certainly also, as a part of that money back guarantee program, there are certainly some things that the student who's in that program, right, has to do, because the college was also thinking about, well, gosh, how do I guarantee? Am I going to have to give the money back to someone who goes through my program, completes the program, and doesn't find a job? There's certainly some criteria that those folks have to do in order to then, if they were not to get a job, they've got to meet certain criteria before they could ask for that money back guarantee.
Fascinating. How much money have you given back?
We have not given back any money today.
Good.
So far, none of those have been able to be reimbursed.
Good. Representative Benning? Same question.
Thank you. Thanks for the question as well. Indiana has had performance funding for higher ed for over a decade. I mean, I think we were one of the first in the country to do that. We also use it in K-12. So when we want to move behavior, we start funding like academic honors, technical honors in a way to push our schools to move that direction. 2 years ago, we started a program called Career Scholarship Accounts, which is another transition program for our high school sophomores through seniors, and the state would recognizes and provides an additional $5,000 in funding for students, and it really is kind of focused on this earn and learn model. So the goal is for them to use this funding for career-focused type of options, and it will also pay for transportation, for tools, for uniforms, things like that would be could be necessary as they have this transition into a workforce or career. We recognize that generally a lot of apprenticeships will not end in a senior year in high school, so that will transition into what would be equivalent of a freshman in high school, and we're working on providing additional funding. The CSA has actually passed 2 years ago, so we have had several pieces of language that would have addressed the third year or the freshman equivalent. We will try. The Senate doesn't like our ideas much, so they keep telling us no. The speaker's determined we're going to be back again with this year to make sure that transition will be smooth. But CSAs are an incentive, to kind of a new model to try to incentivize some different type of behavior, but that will really provide options for students ending in certification or credentials of value.
I think that model's fascinating. To give $5,500, you said.
It's $5,000. $5,500 for the Workforce Ready grant.
Sorry.
$5,000 for. And we actually did max out the first year, which would have been last year. The bill became effective June 30th or July 1 with our fiscal year, and we did not fill all the slots, as you would expect, because the bill was moving through session, and generally high school students plan their schedule in early spring. This year we are oversubscribed and have a waiting list.
That's a great sign. Well, we're at that point where we'd like the audience to come up with your questions. As you guys get up to the microphone, I've got and we've got someone, so I'll skip mine and turn it over to you. You just have to turn on the microphone. It should be right on the top. Maybe the other way?
Is it on now?
There you go.
I think it was on.
Okay, sorry about that.
Kim Amatri, I'm from Florida. Happy to see Chancellor Burns here today. My question is, when you talk about taking those different paths, enrollment, employment, enlistment, when they graduate in 12th grade and are continuing on, do your states have a mechanism to track which path they took after high school graduation?
Our state does. I mean, we actually, with our longitudinal data system, we now are even monitoring student outcomes, and we're actually starting to move away from what I would call an industrial model of education, trying to move more towards the professional, where we're starting to move away from all the inputs and start looking at outcomes. We have data, for instance, that is required from our high schools, so we can look at 1 year, 5 year, 10 years out and see what kind of income the students are bringing home. And then we also will continue to track them with our data system. The one struggle we do have, candidly, right now is enlistment, because the U.S. Department of Defense is not very has not been very cooperative in terms of providing some of those additional details. So we can tell if they enlisted, but beyond that, it's difficult. Although I've been told by Data Quality Council that we are very close to having an agreement with the Department of Defense to start sharing that data, so we'll be able to track that performance as well.
Yeah, we use a variety of databases. We use National Clearinghouse data. We keep at it because we did finally reach an agreement with DoD on military enlistment data to further track students. We use unemployment insurance data, all sorts of different data sets that we have. But that's something we continue to work on building out our longitudinal data systems, ensuring that we can, because it's kind of twofold. We're both trying to see where students go and also better connect our outcomes to our various indicators, either in our accountability system in K-12, to our college and career outcomes bonuses, those types of, for trying to make that more and more robust and ensure that what we are rewarding is actually accurate in terms of where students end up and what their wages are.
I think for Florida, the answer would be similar, right? We do have that data and are able to track those data points. And really purposeful, our Commissioner of Education started a couple of years ago something he calls the Commissioner's Convening. And so it was even 2 years ago at the Commissioner's Convening, we looked at some of those data, right? Look at it from high school all the way up to post-secondary. And at the Commissioner's Convening, he's really strategic, especially when we look at those data sets. So he brought together all of our superintendents from all of our school districts. He then brought all of our college presidents and university presidents together. So they were sat with a day to be able to look at a lot of that workforce data. And we had a whole convening on that to be able to track and continue to look at those data. I'm going to think how we continue to get better and work at that as well.
One thing we did in Indiana, too, we have a significant number of students who started college and didn't complete. So last year, this past session, we actually changed. We have four-year institutions that are not allowed to give associate's degrees, but we actually gave those institutions the ability to give an associate's degree, because if you started in a bachelor's degree granting institution and didn't get enough hours to get that associate degree, but you're close, we now allow them to give an associate degree so that they can at least come to degree completion. So we have been tracking a significant number of those, and we've also let Ivy Tech potentially give a bachelor's degree for a short period of time to kind of push that completion rate as well.
Just one other, that's a great question. I want to add to the responses of everyone on here. One challenge we face is out-of-state wage matching is a big challenge. You can leverage the Swiss II agreement, the state wage interchange system, but that only works for students who are in a Pell-eligible funded program. The College Transparency Act is proposed legislation that would address some of these concerns, so I would urge folks who are in a policy role to advance that legislation. It really helps us hold ourselves accountable for ROI on our programs, especially if our students are moving out of state and making a lot more money. We want to know that. We want to tell their peers, and we also want to recognize that and grow those programs. So, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Kemeny. I'm from Arkansas. And I'd love to hear, maybe starting with Texas, what kind of on-ramp did you have when you began the new higher ed productivity formula? And did you already have the data?
Yeah, so on your first question, that was really an important part of our legislation, and really kind of how we also got buy-in from our institutions is a significant portion of that investment is transition funding, and ensuring that university or that our 2 years were not losing funding in those, there wasn't any sort of significant drop-off, so that was really critical. And then also too, we did, kind of on the more technical side, some emergency rulemaking to kind of get it going, but then the agency took a more thorough and did negotiated rulemaking with stakeholders. So a lot of it too was that we already kind of had our stakeholder buy-in before we ever even got to the legislative session, and that is really critical. I think particularly when you start talking performance funding. And then, so remind me your second question.
Did you already have the data, or did you have to begin collecting the relevant data?
Yeah, so part of we have, like I said, we're still working on some of our longitudinal data systems to better kind of beef up, but a lot of it was that we already had that data. We had think tanks that could also kind of begin to simulate what it would mean for for 2 years to have performance-based funding. And so, a critical piece was that we had the data too to prove out as well that that y'all can do this, we can align. So I think that's a key piece too, and started back in 2015 when we set our workforce goal. So it was a long time coming.
We did transition as well. I will tell you that our universities are still not thrilled with performance funding. I mean, some of them have been beneficiaries, but there have been several of our universities, state universities, that have seen significant decline in enrollment based on their performance. And clearly, over the period of time, we've had to tweak it a little bit. Not all of their funding is performance funding, so they do have a line of funding that is not performance focused. But it's not an easy transition. And if Texas was able to get everybody excited about it, I think I would go the Texas way, because I think most institutions in higher learning are not excited about being put on performance funding metrics.
Hi, my name's Kate. I actually do government affairs for Charter Spectrum, so I've been focused on getting internet to the people post-COVID, but love coming to this conference every year. This question literally just popped in my head, but I think I heard this on a podcast somewhere, but it stuck with me, that higher education is probably one of the only industries that hasn't become more cost efficient over time, right? Like, if anything, it's just become more and more expensive, and cost on personnel, cost on facilities, cost on everything that goes into higher education, it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And I was just wondering if y'all had observed through your expertise with performance funding, what areas of efficiencies higher education providers are starting, like this is compelling them to identify, and what's been the lowest hanging fruit that you're seeing for opportunities to not cut costs to lower the quality, but more because they're efficiencies that were a long time coming and needed to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I work for a private university. I will tell you that performance funding obviously doesn't impact private, but if you look at the college going rate across the country, that's impacting everybody other than your research institution. IU and Purdue, for instance, in Indiana had growth, but generally most of our other universities saw a decline. So there's a lot of factors that come into play, and I think it's not just performance funding. And I think you're totally spot on with the fact that higher ed has got to talk about reinventing itself. The transfer of knowledge has changed so much over the last, COVID had a huge impact. And then the Lilly Endowment is, we work with them frequently, and in fact I was talking to their CEO yesterday, who constantly is talking about how universities are going to have to talk about more collaboration that you don't have to have the PhD in physics here with technology today. You can do a lot more sharing of services and use technology to help drive that rather than feel like you have to constantly build. But I think it's a great point and something that is truly a problem. And I know my committee in Indiana, we are responsible for K-12 through higher ed.
Right.
A lot of my members are constantly beating the drum that it can't have the status quo because it's not working in many cases for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I'll just quickly say, though, I think in Florida we've done a really good job, about keeping tuition, college tuition, and university tuition really affordable. And so I'm really proud of that work that we've done in Florida around that. So I think we maybe see that, potentially a little bit less. But the other thing I would just add on to about that is I think it really is right about having the stakeholder input. And so our Chancellor of Florida Colleges really continues to meet with our college presidents on a really frequent basis to make sure that we do have that stakeholder buy-in, because we know they have to change, right? We have to change with the times, and so that stakeholder buy-in becomes really important for us in Florida.
Thank you. Or if y'all have any other comments.
Yeah, well, I was going to say too. I mean, I think some of our university systems they kind of know it's coming. They can read the tea leaves with our legislature, but a lot of them are being kind of innovative on their own on offering either, some of them, like the University of Texas is starting to do the kind of the $10,000 bachelor's degree and offer those kind of more condensed, where it's still getting you the same skills, but it cuts off some of the kind of random speech class or some, things that maybe not directly are related to that degree. And so they see what's coming, and I think some of them are starting to be innovative about it. But there's certainly a lot more disruption that needs to happen at that level.
One of the things that does impact all higher ed, though, is the accrediting bodies. So the accrediting bodies will require like 120 hours within a specific program of study, and universities don't have any control over it. They have to comply with the accrediting body. So some of that's going to have to start at the federal level to try to trickle down to provide more flexibility and give more credit for prior learning. And I think a lot of those things are things that we're going to have to continue to drive as we move forward.
Right.
That's a great point about that. SAC-COC is piloting a 3-year bachelor's degree, so that's one way to potentially mitigate some of the costs. But I will say cost is an interesting thing to measure, right? So like I have a welding program. I've got ratios for safety reasons, right? Or my nursing program. I can't adjust those ratios. And those folks who teach those programs are expensive, quite honestly, because what they can earn in the private sector drives my costs, right? But so that's one way to look at the cost of services delivered. But the other way to look at it is how much are our graduates from those programs earning and contributing to society? And I would argue that's really high, especially in South Carolina. Our tuition's around $5,200 a year. Most of our students get a $5,000 SC Wins scholarship in our CTE program. So the net cost, I know for nursing, with books and everything, was $1,600 a year. And in fact, with nursing, I lose $25,000 for every nursing graduate we produce. That's how much the program costs. So it's tricky, and if you want to talk more on costs after, I'd love. It's a great question.
And I'm from Florida. I benefited from many of the policy decisions Chancellor Burns talked about. But my mom was a nursing 1 instructor at a community college in the state of Florida in the 90s, and they decided to require that those instructors have master's degrees rather than bachelor's degrees. Yep. And even though her students had exceptional passage rates, that was irrelevant, and she was pushed out of her job unless she went back to grad school. So that's an example. And anyway,
I think that was an accrediting body decision, I believe. Probably. It was not the university.
No. But yeah, that's an example where we up the cost regardless of results.
That's a great example. Thank you.
All right. My question was sort of just teased, but I'll follow up anyway since I was standing in line. Mark Schneiderman. I'm with D2L. We're a learning management system provider working across a lot of these states, and a lot of institutions we're supporting are looking to kind of innovate their models driven by HB8 and some of these policies. Institutions like Purdue looking at competency and models that we just teased, and so that's the string I wanted to follow up on. I know I talked to Dr. Serrata at El Paso about this, about how, to what degree and how performance-based budgeting model will drive more of a move to a competency or a mastery-based model. If you could, I know some of that is related to accreditation and regulation, but maybe if you could speak to how you're, what you're seeing and expecting in that area.
Anyone?
Yeah, well, and I'll kind of take a higher view there. Part of our kind of data systems work that we're doing with alignment between our state agencies is, essentially creating this library and recognizing every kind of possible credential, certification, anything, looking at stackability and those types of acknowledging skills, and then building up to either full kind of certifications or degrees. So I think there's still kind of we have room to grow on our performance model and ensure that we can, and even backing into the high school level of how we can recognize that type of like skill attainment, and also ensure quality, and that the student, because I think one kind of downfall at times, not every career field is set up in a way that those short-term credentials pan out, and they do. I think we do have students at time that they get those short-term credentials, and then they realize like they still need to go get a 4-year, and they're not necessarily able to work while they get the 4 years. So there are a lot of situations in which that doesn't always work. But there's kind of long-term work that we're doing on kind of from the data perspective of how we can recognize those and ensure that they do still allow for a student to move further on down their pathway.
Yeah, in South Carolina, I don't see a drive to competency-based ed through our performance funding reforms at this time, though I think some of the things we talked about earlier with programs that are trying to recruit non-traditional students back to college, those who are 27 or older, that's an area I think that's ripe for innovation, and that many of our competitors in the nonprofit sector are offering now, the Western governors of the world, and we're just not in that space, but I'd like to be, but I need support from our accrediting body to be able to do so.
Yeah, I think WGU is probably a fairly good example, and we're WGU State, so it is one of those models that, plus it gives credit. I mean, you have to be able to assess for prior learning, which, if you're able to get that assessment, give credit for that, that actually shortens the time a student's involved in the environment. I will tell you, WGU actually has, if you're not familiar with it, I'm not doing an advertisement for them, but Gallup has done a lot of surveys about WGU in terms of their alumni feel like they were better served there than schools like Ivy League schools because of the fact that there's a lot of mentoring and wraparound services in an online program, which is kind of a unique offering.
Thank you. Got time for one more?
Hi, and thank you for all of your good information. Regarding the expenses of college and everything, State University System, New College, you can get a 3-year degree still, I believe?
It's part of our state university system.
Yeah,
yes.
that's one of the options. The Bright Futures program is so helpful. I'm sorry, I'm Julie from Florida.
Hi, Julie.
And upward 20 to 25% of our graduates get either the Florida Academic or the Florida Medallion. Thank you so much to go to the State University System. Or you didn't say they can get 100% at the State College if they're Florida Medallion, correct?
Correct.
Okay, here's my question. We have so many more that can get the test scores for Gold Seal, but we're not really equipped for the trade. We make attempts, pull back, make attempts, pull back, but we found out that we can dual enroll at the State College. Would those be accepted towards Gold Seal?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I would say with the Bright Futures program, it can be really nuanced, but happy to look into that, and I can share information from our Bright Futures office with you. So.
Okay, thanks. I'll give you my card. Thank you.
That sounds great.
Well, with that last question, please give me a warm round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, guys.